It's great to say hi to you today. Welcome to Vida in Online. My name is Luis. With me, my friend Pris from Mexico City and my friend Mario Duron from Monterrey. Friends, how are you? Today is May 17th, but on May 15th, it was Teacher's Day here in Mexico. How did you leave it? Well, May 15th, Teacher's Day, I want to congratulate every teacher wherever they're watching from. I come from a teaching family. My wife is a teacher, my sister in law, my mother in law, cousins, a lot of people. So, firsthand, you're doing a great job. Congratulations. We've seen in these past weeks that we've homeschooled, but it's nothing compared to what you do. Congratulations. And as I told you, Luis, these weeks we've tried to do things differently, caring for each other. But at home, my wife took her corner, my children as well, and I had no other solution that having my special place, which is the bathroom. I go in there with my laptop and I have everything needed for my daily activities. Oh, friends, I don't have children, so all my admiration to you. I haven't gotten to that moment of hiding in the bathroom to have a little quiet, but I admire you, all of you, everyone who has children and are going through this. But I want to tell you how I'm living this over here because we're having a lot of video conferences all day, and I've had everything: the kid crying, the mom scolding them and not muting. This is crazy. And suddenly you can I continue? And it's very complicated and funny at the same time. Well, maybe not so funny for parents, but on this end it is. So, friends, thank you and all my admiration for you. Congratulations to teachers and to new teachers who are the parents. Yes, please, you're right. In our case, well, it's not the case. We have a very ordered family. Our children are very obedient. Oh gosh, sorry, friends. You're right, please. So let's continue with our program today. I want to say hi to everyone, especially those who are here with us for the first time or maybe for a few Sundays connecting with our transmission. Hi to all of you. And what we're going to do today is we're going to listen to a song, specifically a song that answers to a question that you may have asked or we have all asked, and it's the following: what does God think of me? What is God thinking about me? And this song is talking about this. Get comfortable there at home and let's enjoy this segment.
¿Quién soy yo para que el gran rey me acepte así? Me encontró en mi perdición su amor por mí, oh su amor por mí. Libre soy en él, libre en verdad, soy hijo de Dios, si lo soy. Libre soy, él me rescató, su gracia en mí. Aún siendo
Thank you for being a part of Vida In at home. It is something really important for us that you take some time of your Sunday to connect. Honestly, when all this virus thing started, we had no idea what was going to happen. We had a lot of doubts, many questions, more questions than answers. But there was something we were sure of. The Church of Jesus was not going to stop. So we started to think on new ways to be connected, new ways of working remotely, how our teams in Monterrey, Saltillo, and Mexico City could get together and do things they had never done before. We started to think on every way in which we could connect to you through a screen. We thought that what we really needed to do was bring an important, a significant message of faith and hope, but especially we understood it was a great opportunity to remind you of the great love of God. This is what has kept us enthusiastic every day, and we've learned a lot. But one of the things that's most clear than ever is that even though we cannot meet physically, there are no barriers for us to be connected and build community. One of the most authentic and real ways in which you and I can experience the love of God is through others, in community. It's when we are in a group of people who are looking for the same things as us that we can truly be who we are, and we can overcome a problem, reach a goal, and we can do this in a community. It's when God can transform and change lives. We truly believe this. God uses the power of community to do. There's a proverb that says, as iron sharpens iron, so one person sharpens another. And we want to give you this opportunity. If you are connecting today and you've never been a part of a group, a small group, we want you to have the opportunity of doing so. We know today we are experiencing more challenges, complex challenges that you had never experienced before. But regardless of it being a financial or a relational issue, an anxiety or fear or stress, we don't want you to go through this alone. We want you to have the opportunity of connecting in a small group, a short group that we're going to start. These are 4 to 6 week groups, and the only thing you need to do is register in the link that's on the screen, and we will get in touch with you to give you more information of the opportunities we are opening in the next days so that you can experience this. So don't miss the opportunity of being a part of a small group where you can live life with other people, build life together, and experience the love of God through others.
Mi esperanza eres tú, mi refugio es la cruz. Cuando hablo, estás tú y me escuchas, buen Jesús. Tus palabras vida dan, mis heridas sanarás. Eres bueno, eres fiel y me entiendes otra vez, porque eres mi Padre. En tu nombre libre soy, por tu muerte vivo estoy. Soy tu hijo, sé quién soy, me rodea tu favor, solo en ti fuerte soy, solo en ti fuerte soy, solo en ti fuerte soy, soy tu y por tu muerte vivo estoy. Soy tu hijo, sé quién soy. Me rodea tu favor. En tu nombre libre soy. Por tu muerte vivo estoy. Soy tu hijo, sé quién soy. Y me rodea tu favor. Solo en ti fuerte soy. Solo en ti fuerte soy. Solo en ti fuerte soy. Soy tu hijo, sé quién soy. Y soy tu hijo, sé quién soy.
Hey friends, thank you for being here with us or connecting for the first time. Actually, if this is your first time in our transmission at Vida In, it is a pleasure for us to get to you through this means wherever you are, which is most likely at home, in any device you are watching us on, even if you are watching us after we already broadcasted this on Sunday. It is an honor to have you with us. Our intent today in this segment is to continue a conversation we started last week, precisely directed by Jair, whom you just saw a moment ago, and where we started a conversation about this large topic of resilience. And I don't know if that sounds as important to you as to me, but if you saw that video or you heard that podcast, the topic is extremely relevant for what we are living right now. And this topic of resilience, this capacity of bending without breaking, or as Jair said last week, the capacity of facing adversities of life, and I have it here on my computer. It says, overcoming adversities of life and being transformed by them. It's what we've wanted to start talking about. And it's extraordinary that resilience is like a muscle. Like when you and I exercise, the more we exercise that muscle, the stronger it gets. And the same thing happens with resilience. The more tensioning experiences we have, if we do it well, if we develop resilience, then we will be stronger for the next occasion in which we experience these situations of tension. And what I'm going to do today in the following minutes is to translate this topic to a specific area, a very particular situation that I believe we have all lived in life, we are living or we will live, and I'm referring to rejection. We will talk today about rejection and about how resilience can be the key to face rejection. And this leads me to ask you a question, which is, have you ever felt rejected? And I'm sure your answer is yes, because rejection is a universal human experience and it's very varied, meaning that if you look back to your life, even to your childhood, and it's something you can do, you can see the opportunities in which you felt rejected from your childhood. Maybe you had an experience, something that it's now childish to you, that didn't hurt you that much, like for example not being chosen for a game or that team at school, or being part of that social club that you had or popularity club, or maybe some other experiences that are more difficult to handle or to digest, like for example losing a job. That is a way of rejection. Probably nowadays many people, like for example the producer in our campus here in Saltillo reminded me of that, the amount of jobs that during this circumstance are being lost in our country. We are over 500,000 formal employments lost, and maybe that's your case. And although evidently this is an extraordinary circumstance, it is still a personal rejection because you feel you were set aside, and that is something very difficult to cope with. Or what about divorce? That's a form of rejection. Separation and divorce is basically saying, I don't want to be with you anymore. And of course, it is a very simplistic way of saying it because there's a lot of ways and circumstances involved. But at the end is rejection, and the emotional experience is exactly the same. Or what about this feeling or the experience of abandonment, being abandoned by a parent or by a person who was not supposed to abandon you? Like my case, many of you know my personal story, and you know that I was raised by a single mom who, and I never met my dad. He already passed away, but that experience of abandonment or fighting with the idea of why did that person abandoned me when that person was not supposed to do it? Why wasn't he by my side when he should have? When I most needed, that was a terrible experience. It is still challenging. It is internal struggle that has taken maybe even decades to me to be someone emotionally healthy. That's what I consider myself today, but it hasn't been simple. And that may be your case. The point is this: we all know what it feels to be rejected. And since it's such a common experience and so marking, I might say it that way, it's something that has been studied for years. Actually, formally, rejection from a psychotherapy or psychology point of view has been studied. Cause effect correlation with other behaviors has been studied since 1890. Imagine that, since 1890 it's been formally studied. We studied the impact, causes and consequences on an individual. There are actually nowadays over 3,000 formal publications that you can find about rejection. There is a theory right now that is generally accepted. The theory, well, it's called the theory of acceptance rejection interpersonally and the consequences it has on an individual. It is a theory from Ronald Runner, and from the 60s it is broadly used. He says, and this is just as a foundation of this conversation, that there are different forms of rejection. We could talk from coldness or lack of affection, that indifference, all the way through hostility or aggressiveness, even indifference or neglect. That feeling you have, although the other person doesn't show a hostility towards you, this feeling you have of not being accepted, loved, or appreciated by him or her. And that speaks about your relationship with your parents, your spouse, your children, your close friends. We're not talking about only childhood. And this takes me to tell you this: rejection is so powerful. It's such a powerful emotional experience that it can leave us paralyzed with the feeling of I cannot move. Even it can convince us that we are too broken, that we are a broken object, as to be used again. That is, in essence, the experience rejection produces. This is why acceptance, when you think about it, acceptance is such a powerful motivator. Personal acceptance. When you have a relationship, you are in a relationship environment, no matter what kind of it is, when you feel accepted by what you are, that motivates you. It's like a magnet. And at the same time, continuous rejection, on the other hand, not only produces a lack of motivation, but it can produce a mix of insensitivity and violence. It's a vicious circle, because a rejected person can get to a point of saying, you know what, I will close and I will raise a barrier, and I won't allow and I won't receive care, expressions of care, because my All these experiences have led me to be insensitive, and I cannot give that which I never received. Or I can end up being violent, physically, verbally. But the point is that, in a summary, rejection has the potential of ruining us. And I don't know if you see it the same way. It can, but it doesn't have to be that way. And that is the great, great news we have. And I want us to go over it today together. It doesn't have to be this way, because if we grow in resilience, if we grow in our capacity of dealing in a healthy way, emotionally, with rejection, we can come out of it strengthened, even from experiences that could mark us and ruin in us if it weren't because of resilience. But before talking about that, I don't know if you are like me, but I need models, like references, especially regarding behavior and applying changes to my own life. And when thinking about this message once and again, of course, I have several models of people whom I know or have been rejected or lived through rejection. But in all cases, my number one reference went always back to Jesus Christ. And if you don't consider yourself a Jesus follower, this is something great, because you don't have to believe he is who he said to be to extract the principles he implemented to elevate his level of resilience and face rejection successfully. You don't have to be a Jesus follower, but if you are, I don't need to convince you of this, right? It doesn't matter if you're a Jesus follower from this side of Catholicism or evangelical Christians. I don't need to convince you that Jesus is a reference, an amazing one regarding to resilience and handling of rejection in a healthy, emotional way. And what I want to do precisely is go over some moments of Jesus' life and how he handled rejection. But before, let me show you what a man wrote, a leader, a spiritual Jewish leader who lived about 750 years before Jesus Christ, and he wrote this in the time he lived, anticipating the arrival of the Messiah, of Christ, and how his description of Jesus is amazing, talking particularly about this topic. Let me read it in my computer. You will see it on screen. Isaiah wrote this about Jesus Christ. He was despised. He wrote it as an anticipation. He was despised and rejected by mankind, a man of suffering and familiar with pain. Like one from whom people hide their faces, he was despised, and we held him in low esteem. I don't know if this is as incredible to you as it is to me. It is as if Isaiah, talking about this statement that you probably heard before, but in the context of this conversation from last week and this week in regards to rejection, it's as if Isaiah was telling us, I want to show you how rejection looks like in the broadest extension and meaning on the life of a man. That is how a rejected man looks like, and it's impacting that 750 years before he predicted it. Now, this was before his birth, but what about after he lived? John, who was an apostle, a writer of one of the Gospels and other parts of the New Testament, who was in that intimate circle of Jesus, his closest friend, after living this, a few years went by and he wrote that Gospel known today as the Gospel or the biography of John. And in chapter 1, John, again, talking about this experience of being rejected, confirmed what Isaiah wrote. And look what John wrote on chapter 1, verse 11. Talking about Jesus, he came to the world, which was his own, but his own did not receive him. That is rejection. Jesus was extraordinarily rejected. And I have a list here that I want to go over with you, a list of random moments in the life of Jesus, and how these moments reveal he truly went through the experience of being rejected, like any one of us, maybe even more than us. And I do it because I think it confirms the fact of Jesus being a great reference in regards to rejection. Then I want to give you a list of how he handled this emotionally, in a healthy way, to confirm Jesus is not only a reference to talk about rejection, but it is a reference about resilience in the face of rejection. Jesus was expelled once again, of the churches in his time. That's a way of rejection. We don't want you to be here with us. It's rejection probably based on intolerance, on the religious intolerance. We don't agree with what you're teaching. He was criticized by Jewish religious leaders once and again, persecuted by his own nation, betrayed by Judah, one of his intimate followers. Betrayal is a form of rejection. He was denied by one of his closest friends, and I'm talking about the Apostle Peter. He was tortured all the way through agony, and at the end he was humiliated before the whole city, of Jerusalem, when after being tortured, he was crucified and died in a public scene. That is rejection. Now, even though Jesus was extraordinarily rejected, he maintained his mental health in an impeccable way. Jesus was resilient. He didn't victimize himself. For example, once and again, he told his disciples that he was gonna be caught and that he was gonna die and that it was okay. That's not a victimization attitude, because victimizing yourself is a proof of a lack of emotional health. Jesus was not self-compassionate. He said, I can take my life and I can give it away whenever I want to. I am responsible for my life. Jesus didn't deny his anguish. For example, when he was in the Garden of Gethsemane, on the night he was arrested, he poured all his anguish in prayer. He even cried and sweated the blood. And there he said, I am anguished to death. That is something I mentioned because when you own your emotions, when you connect to them and you acknowledge them, means that you're emotionally healthy. Jesus showed compassion beyond all of this, beyond the betrayal. He was compassionate. Remember, on that same place when he was arrested, the story says Romans arrived and Peter violently caught the ear of a soldier. Jesus took it and he restored it. That is compassion in the middle of persecution and rejection. Jesus connected significantly with other people. Once and again, he did it with the woman who was caught in adultery. That famous story of people who were going to stone her and being compassionate towards her. Jesus confronted lie and hypocrisy. He continually told the leaders that they were hypocrites, that you are like a tomb, white on the outside, and inside there's just death and rot. Jesus told Judah, a friend. Imagine that. He called him a friend, and at the end, talking about an impeccable emotional health, Jesus was able to forgive. Upon such a rejection, he forgave his murderers and his captors. Remember that phrase when he was crucified, when he said, Lord, forgive them, for they don't know what they do. And the point is, and I'm going to say it this way, Jesus was extraordinarily resilient. And probably you are there thinking, as I am, yes, but I am not Jesus. I am not Jesus. And that's true. You and I are not Jesus. But nevertheless, you and I know people who are not Jesus, but after living experiences of rejection, they have been resilient and kept a sound mind. Now, when you think of Jesus as the ideal, you know, something unreachable or unreachable as a fact, and you think he's over there as an ideal and I am over here in the real, this gap that is created between real and ideal creates a tension that we need to grow. In other words, you and I need examples, large examples, big examples, defiant examples of behavior that we can pursue in order to grow. So what I want to do with the rest of the time I have today to close in this last minutes is share with you 3 very practical ideas to grow in resilience, how to be more resilient in the midst of rejection. Idea number 1, and taking into consideration the life of Jesus as a reference, be responsible. Admit what you are feeling, embrace pain, and connect with your emotions is part of that process of being responsible. That which Jesus did in Gethsemane. This hurt, this is anguishing, I don't know if I'm going to be able to endure it. That's part of it. And even though there are many things that are out of control, there is something upon which you have control. I have some control, and you have some control of what you live. And that is associated with personal responsibility. This takes me to the fact of I need to ask questions about the experiences that I go through. What would you do different after this experience of rejection, after that marriage failure? What would you do after losing your job, after the financial failure you have had? What would you do different? If you're a Jesus follower, this is a prayer that reflects responsibility. You can pray something like this: Lord, help me to see what things I am not seeing, what am I not doing, what I have stopped doing, and I have to learn and change. Become responsible. Secondly, I want to encourage you to do in this practical application is to not make it personal. Meaning, you and I have a saying for this. Sometimes we think and tell people, don't take it personal. You have a much more of a thick skin. Eliana, my wife, and I have learned through years. We've been married for almost 17 years now. We've learned to ask a question that is more than a question, it's more like a practice. We tell each other when we feel affected, offended, or rejected by the other. We've forced ourselves to think, okay, what is the most generous interpretation I can find for the behavior Eliana is having, or in Eliana's case, my behavior? I'm sure there's a way for him to behave that way, to say what he's saying. Maybe he's tired, maybe he doesn't know what I need, but you have to find the most generous interpretation for the other's behavior. That's a practical way of not making it personal. That's what Jesus did when he said again at the cross, forgive them for they don't know what they're doing. Again, you can think it's Jesus, Alejandro, but a completely human being, ordinary like you and I, called Stephen, minutes before being stoned to death on a public square, said exactly the same words: Lord, forgive them for they don't know what they do. And the third thing I want to tell you to conclude is to develop a healthy identity. And probably, and I say probably because I am sure of it, this third practice, to be more resilient, is the most important that I can share with you. This practice simply takes us to ask ourselves, or to respond, who I am and who I am not. Who I am and who I am not. At the beginning, I used to think identity was something, in my case, related to one stage in my life, my teenage years. Maybe that's your case, you've thought the same. But as I grow, in my case, I just turned 44, I am convinced that the readjustment or the molding, the polishing of my identity is a long life process. It means I need to remind myself once and again who I am and who I am not. Jesus had a very clear identity. In the Gospels, you can find a lot of times, at least 20 times, where Jesus says, I am the bread of life, I am the good shepherd, I am the door, I am the way, the truth, and the life. I am. And at the same time, he said who I am not. When Pilate interviewed him after being imprisoned, he told Pilate, that's what you say I am, but I am not that. Jesus had a clear identity, and that takes me to encourage you, in terms of a healthy identity, to acknowledge that what you lived in terms of rejection, that layoff, that divorce you're going through, that abandonment you were victim of, the experience of failure, that's not who you are. That's what happened, but you are something else. You are not your failures. You are not rejection. You are not what others say you are. And therefore, that should lead us to ask ourselves then, what is it? And maybe you're asking yourself, what is it then, the source where I should build a healthy identity from? And it's a good question. And if you've heard me talk about this in the past, probably you've heard me use a phrase I use frequently when talking about identity and source of identity. The most reliable source of identity for my own life is my Heavenly Father and what He says I am. I have tried with possessions, achievements, capacities, gifts, abilities, relationships, but none of those sources are permanent. None of those sources are invariable. None relationship, even with the people who loves you the most, no amount of goods is a reliable, permanent, and invariable source for identity. In this crisis, we realize everything we have can vanish like that in 3 weeks. My desire for you is that, and this is honestly my prayer, that at the end of this message, you can embrace the idea that your Heavenly Father has clarity on who you are and wants to help you to build an identity, a healthy one. Actually, what I want to do to finish is take an invitation that famous man, the Apostle Peter, made to a group of Jesus followers to whom they wrote a letter. One of 2 letters Peter wrote, where he made them an invitation, which I want to extend to you, because maybe this is the first time you listen about putting your identity or taking God as the source of your healthy identity. Peter experienced rejection. He was a martyr. He was persecuted and put to death as a martyr. He saw Jesus experience rejection. Peter saw Jesus and denied him. Peter wrote this, and I'm going to read it here, and you're going to see it on the screen. Peter wrote this in one of his letters. Come close to Him, to Christ, the living stone, rejected by humans, talking about rejection, but chosen by God and precious to Him. In other words, Jesus knows exactly how you feel when you are rejected. Even though He was rejected and know how you feel, He knows the power of acceptance and wants to accept you. From there, it flows, or should flow, our identity if we want it to be healthy. Now, maybe you're thinking, Alejandro, I have never done this and I don't know how, and I simply want to tell you how to do this. So right now, at the end of the chat of our transmission, you can find a link to click on it and to connect to other people. Do of your identity search in God, not only a personal search, but collective. We want to open groups so that you can connect to other people. My desire at the end, before closing, is that you can continue to discover a version of you. Although I don't know well your story, I want you to find a more resilient version of you. That's my desire, my prayer for you. So this is why I want to guide you in a brief prayer. There where you are, I would love that you follow me on a prayer. For this, I want you to bow your head, just not to be distracted, and that you may repeat this to God while I pray. God, I want to thank you. Thank you for identifying yourself with me, with my experience of rejection. I want God to assume the responsibility as you did and take you as my model. Not make it personal, and do not think the rejection is personal. And at the end, I want to build a more healthy identity, one that is strong, based in you. I thank you for that, Lord, in the name of Jesus. Amen. Friends, thank you very much for being connected with us. We will be more resilient.